The Nazis laughed at a librarian until they learned she was hiding 200 children among books. Yvonne Nevejean, March 12, 1943, 2:35 p.m., at the central office of Louvre National de l'Enfance, Brussels, occupied Belgium. Hauptsturmführer Klaus Barbie walks into the building without warning, followed by two Gestapo officers whose boots echo across the marble floor. They've received a report about Belgium's child aid organization, led by a woman named Yvonne Nevejean, allegedly acting suspiciously. Children moved without complete documentation, funds that don't add up, inconsistent records. Barbie climbs the stairs to the director's office on the second floor, stopping before an oak door with a plaque that reads, "Director, Yvonne Nevejean." With the arrogance typical of the Gestapo, he opens it without knocking. Behind the desk sits Yvonne Nevejean, a 42-year-old woman with brown hair pulled into a severe bun, wire-rimmed glasses, and a conservative gray dress. She looks like the classic librarian, not threatening, not memorable, not the kind of person anyone fears. Exactly as she planned. "Fräulein Nevejean," Barbie says in French with a heavy accent, "I am Hauptsturmführer Barbie of the Gestapo, and I need to review your children's records." Yvonne rises with an appearance of calm. "Of course, Herr Hauptsturmführer. Which records specifically?" "All of them, from 1940. Yvonne nods and walks toward a massive filing cabinet that covers an entire wall. 4 meters wide, 2 meters tall, with dozens of drawers and thousands of files. We have records for 8,300 children under our care since the beginning of the occupation. Where would you like to begin?" Barbie looks at the cabinet and immediately understands that reviewing 8,000 files would take weeks. "Jewish children," he specifies impatiently. "Show me the files for Jewish children in your system." Yvonne opens a drawer, deliberate movements, and removes a thin folder. "We have 37 Jewish children officially registered as war orphans whose parents died in bombings." Barbie snatches the folder and examines it carefully. The documents look impeccable. Names, birth dates, photographs, parents' death certificates, everything perfectly correct. "Only 37, Barbie says with obvious skepticism. "In all of Belgium, only 37 Jewish children." "Unfortunately, yes," Yvonne replies in a neutral professional voice. "Most Jewish families evacuated before the invasion, and those who stayed kept their children with them." Barbie isn't convinced at all, but the files appear legitimate, and he has no concrete evidence, only vague suspicion. "We will continue monitoring your operations," he warns in a threatening tone. "Any irregularity will be dealt with severely." "Of course, Herr Hauptsturmführer." Barbie and his officers finally leave. Yvonne waits until she hears the main door close, then sits down slowly. Her hands, perfectly controlled during the inspection, now tremble slightly. What Barbie did not discover, what the Nazis would never know until after liberation, was that the woman he had just dismissed as a mere librarian was running one of the most sophisticated child rescue networks in Western Europe. Those 37 children in the official folder were real, but there were many others. 183 more Jewish children hidden across a network of orphanages, convents, and foster families throughout Belgium. Children whose files did not exist in that cabinet. Children who had been erased from the official system and concealed among the records of Belgian orphans, camouflaged under false identities, and protected by a network of nuns, priests, and social workers who risked everything. This is the story of how a Belgian librarian outwitted the Gestapo for 4 years, turned orphanages into fortresses, used bureaucracy as a weapon, and transformed her ordinary appearance, her monotone voice, and her bored civil servant demeanor into the perfect camouflage to save 4,600 children. Chapter 1. The Social Worker. Yvonne Nevejean was born on January 7, 1900, in Schaerbeek, a suburb of Brussels, into a middle-class Belgian Catholic family. Her father, Jules, was an accountant. Her mother, Marie, was a teacher. An educated, progressive family, committed to public service. Yvonne studied social work at the Free University of Brussels, graduating in 1922 in a new field, an emerging profession based on the idea that social problems could be addressed scientifically, systematically, and through professional training. Her first position was as a social worker at a Catholic orphanage in Brussels, working with abandoned children, World War I war orphans, and children from poor families who could not support them. It was difficult, emotionally draining work. But Yvonne discovered she had a particular gift. Organization. She could see systems where others saw chaos, and she could build structures, procedures, and effective coordination networks. Within 3 years, she had completely reorganized the orphanage's filing system, established a network of foster families, and developed a follow-up program for adopted children. In 1925, she married Yvonne Nevejean, a civil engineer, and together they had 2 sons, Jacques in 1926 and André in 1929. Yvonne kept working, unusual for a married woman at the time. But Albert supported her because he understood social work was not merely a job for her. It was a calling. In 1936, the Belgian government established l'Œuvre nationale de l'enfance, known as ONE, the National Child Welfare Organization, to coordinate child welfare services across Belgium. Yvonne was hired as an administrative assistant at age 36. ONE was ambitious. It coordinated public and private orphanages, child health, clinics, nutrition programs, and adoption services. By 1939, it supervised the welfare of more than 20,000 children across Belgium. Yvonne rose quickly because her organizational talent was invaluable. She created a centralized filing system, established communication protocols between institutions, and developed standardized forms, reporting procedures, and oversight mechanisms. It was bureaucratic, tedious work, but absolutely critical. Without effective organization, vulnerable children fell through the cracks. In 1939, Yvonne was promoted to deputy director of ONE under Raymond van der Straeten. The director, an older, conservative man, who focused on politics and public relations, while the real management work fell almost entirely on Yvonne. On May 10, 1940, Germany invaded Belgium with a devastating blitzkrieg. 18 days later, on May 28th, Belgium officially surrendered. King Leopold III remained in the country under German house arrest, while the Belgian government fled into exile in London. The occupation began immediately. Wehrmacht soldiers in the streets, Nazi officials in government buildings, German regulations replacing Belgian law. For ONE, the occupation created an instant crisis. Thousands of children were displaced by the invasion. War orphans, families separated during evacuation, children lost, traumatized, and completely alone. Yvonne worked 18-hour days through June and July 1940, reuniting families, locating lost children, and establishing temporary orphanages. It was absolute chaos. Chaos she could organize. At first, the Nazis did not interfere. They needed stability in Belgium, and they understood functioning child services prevented social disorder. So ONE continued operating under nominal German supervision. In August 1940, Raymond van der Straeten officially resigned as director for health reasons. But in truth, he could not work under Nazi occupation. Even administrative collaboration made him sick. The Nazis appointed a replacement, a Belgian collaborationist official. But the man lasted only 2 months before being transferred, leaving the position vacant again. In October 1940, the German occupation authorities offered the directorship of one to Yvonne Nevejean. It was a pragmatic choice. She knew the system perfectly. She was competent, and she was a woman, seen as politically harmless. Yvonne faced an impossible decision. Accepting meant working under Nazi occupation. Refusing meant abandoning thousands of vulnerable children with no protection at all. That night, she consulted Albert. "If I accept, I will technically be collaborating and working for the Nazi administration." Albert replied with quiet wisdom, "Or you'll be in a position to help from the inside." Yvonne accepted and became director of L'Œuvre Nationale de l'Enfance on November 1st, 1940, at age 40, an official government administrator under the Nazi regime. The Nazis were satisfied. They had installed a competent manager who would keep child services running without causing problems. They had no idea what they had just done. Chapter 2. The First Children. The first anti-Jewish measures in Belgium began in October 1940. The official definition of who was Jewish, mandatory registration, and signage on Jewish businesses. The familiar progression already tested in Germany, Austria, and Poland. By May 1942, Belgian Jews and Jewish refugees in Belgium, about 65,000 people, faced severe restrictions. Banned from public employment, barred from most professions, and Jewish children expelled from public schools. And then, the systematic deportations began. On August 4th, 1942, the first deportation train left Mechelen, a transit camp in Belgium, bound for Auschwitz. On board were 1,000 Belgian Jews, men, women, and children. Gert Jaspa and his wife, Yvonne Jaspa, not related to Yvonne Nevejean despite the similar surname, were leaders of the Comité de Défense des Acquis Juifs, CDJ, an underground Jewish resistance organization. They immediately understood that children were in mortal danger. The CDJ began a desperate operation: hide Jewish children by separating them from their parents before deportations and placing them with non-Jewish families in Catholic orphanages or in convents, anywhere that kept them off the trains to Auschwitz. But there was a massive problem: documentation. Jewish children needed false identities. Non-Jewish birth certificates, baptismal records, paperwork proving they were not Jewish. Without that, any Gestapo inspection would expose them instantly. Forging documents was possible. The CDJ had contacts. But integrating those documents into official systems was almost impossible. If a child with a forged birth certificate was checked against central government files, the forgery would be discovered immediately, unless someone directly controlled the central files. In September 1942, Yvonne Jaspa contacted Yvonne Nevejean. The two women vaguely knew each other from pre-war social work circles, and Jaspa requested an urgent meeting. They met in a small cafe in Ixelles, a Brussels suburb, where Jaspa was blunt. "We need to hide Jewish children, hundreds of them, and we need false identities that can survive official inspection. You control one's central files. You can help." Nevejean immediately understood what was being asked. Helping Jewish children was a capital crime under Nazi occupation. If discovered, she would face execution. Not only her, but also her family and the hidden children. Everyone dead. "How many children?" Nevejean asked quietly. "Right now, 50. Eventually, hundreds, perhaps 1,000. Nevejean considered for a long moment, then nodded. I will do it. But I need full control, without CDJ interference in how I manage placements. You bring me children, I hide them, I handle the documentation. Agreed. The system Nevejean developed was brilliantly simple, and it worked on 3 levels. Level 1, false identities. Each Jewish child received a completely new identity. A new name, a new backstory, new documents. Nevejean used deceased Belgian children as templates. She searched for children who had died in infancy before deportations, born around the same date as the Jewish child needing an identity. Then, she resurrected the dead child inside one's files. The Jewish child officially became the dead Belgian child. Same name, same birth date, now alive. A war orphan under one's care. Level 2, physical placement. Children were strategically placed across a network of Catholic institutions, mostly convents, but also Catholic orphanages and Catholic foster families. Nevejean coordinated with key religious leaders, Father Bruno, chaplain to the Catholic resistance, and Cardinal Van Rooij, Archbishop of Mechelen. Nuns were perfect allies, trained in obedience, discipline, and secrecy. They would not ask why a Jewish child was being presented as a Catholic orphan. They would simply follow instructions. Level 3, official files. Nevejean meticulously altered one's central archives to match the false identities. If the Gestapo inspected, it would find perfectly consistent documentation. One records, convent records, and civil birth certificates all aligned. The first girl Nevejean personally hid was Miriam Lichtenstein, 6 years old, whose parents were arrested in a raid in Antwerp on September 10, 1942. The CDJ rescued her only hours before the Gestapo returned for the children. Nevejean transformed her into Marie Leclerc, a Belgian orphan whose parents supposedly died in a British bombing in 1940. She was placed in the convent of the Sisters of St. Mary in Wevelgem, West Flanders. The nuns received simple, clear instructions. This girl is Catholic. Her name is Marie. Never ask about her previous life. Never mention that she is Jewish, not even among yourselves. Miriam became Marie immediately. She attended daily mass, prayed the rosary faithfully, and learned catechism. The nuns treated her exactly as they treated any Catholic orphan. Over the next 3 months, Nevejean hid 37 more children while constantly refining the system. She built a network of trusted contacts, priests who provided false baptismal certificates, civil officials who registered resurrected children without asking questions, and foster families willing to take children with no explanations. By December 1942, Nevejean ran a sophisticated, efficient operation. The CDJ brought her children. She processed them quickly. New identities, safe placements, flawless paperwork. Within 48 hours of arriving at her office, a Jewish child disappeared completely from the system, replaced by a Belgian Catholic orphan. The Nazis suspected absolutely nothing. To them, Nevejean was exactly what she seemed: a dull government functionary managing child welfare bureaucracy. Chapter Tachwar Sinar 3. The Rescue Machine. By early 1943, Nevejean's network had expanded dramatically. She no longer hid only the children brought by the CDJ. Jewish families facing deportation began contacting her directly. Children appeared at her office with desperate parents pleading, "Hide my child, please." It was a massive operation, and it needed solid infrastructure. Nevejean carefully recruited a team, not professional resistance fighters, but ordinary social workers who shared her horror at the deportations. Claire Murdoch became her principal assistant. André Guerlin was a young social worker of 23. Maurice Heiber was one's accountant, quietly managing funds. Each of them knew the risks. Each chose to participate voluntarily. The rescue process was standardized into clear steps. Step 1, initial contact. The Jewish family contacted the CDJ or Nevejean directly, often with only hours before an expected raid. Time was absolutely critical. Step 2, extraction. André Guerlin typically handled this with efficiency. She would pick up the child, sometimes multiple children, directly from the family home using public transport. 2 social workers traveling with children in Brussels looked completely normal. No one looked twice. Step 3, transformation. The child was brought directly to Nevejean's office. The door closed, and a difficult conversation began. Your name is Jean now, not Chaim. Jean, your father was a Belgian laborer and your mother worked in a factory. Both died in a bombing. You have no siblings. Do you understand? Repeat it. 5, 6, 7-year-old children learning false identities, memorizing backstories, and, at least outwardly, forgetting who they really were. Step 4, documentation. Maurice Heiber meticulously produced the necessary paperwork. Birth certificates using templates of dead children, altered one records in central files, transfer letters to receiving institutions. Everything perfect, everything forged. Step 5, placement. The child was carefully transported to a convent, orphanage, or foster family. Most went to Catholic institutions because convents were ideal, isolated, disciplined, and accustomed to secrecy. Nevejean developed a network of more than 30 participating convents. Sisters of Charity, Sisters of Our Lady, Sisters of St. Vincent de Paul. Each order actively contributed. The convent Mother Superiors understood exactly what they were doing. Mother Superior Marie of the Wezenbeek convent told Nevejean directly, "Sister, we know these children are Jewish and we know the risks. We accept them anyway because God will judge us by our actions. We would rather be judged for saving lives than for doing nothing." Convents provided the perfect environment. Children attended attached Catholic schools and participated in religious services. From the outside, they were completely indistinguishable from ordinary Catholic orphans. But the nuns treated them with special tenderness because they understood the trauma. Children separated from their parents, forced to deny their identities, living in constant fear. Sarah Levin, hidden at 8 years old as Sophie Laurent in a convent in Namur, recalled decades later. Sister Agnes whispered to me one night after prayers, "Sophie, never forget who you really are. But for now, you must be Sophie to survive." She knew perfectly, and they all knew. The system worked because it was bureaucratically perfect. Each child had complete documentation at 3 levels. 1, the foster institution, and local civil records. If the Gestapo inspected any level, the records matched perfectly. Nevejean also developed an ingenious financial system. 1 paid institutions a standard subsidy for every child under their care, and the hidden Jewish children received the exact same subsidy as legitimate orphans. The money came from the Belgian government budget, now controlled by the Nazis. In other words, the Nazis were paying to hide Jewish children from themselves, without knowing it. By mid-1943, Nevejean had successfully hidden more than 150 children. The operation processed 5 to 7 new children each week, running like a rescue machine at full capacity. But growth increased risk. More people involved, more active locations, more opportunities for fatal mistakes. Chapter 4, Barbie's Inspection. We return to the moment from the introduction. March 12, 1943. Hauptsturmführer Klaus Barbie inspecting Nevejean's files. The visit was no accident. The Gestapo had received information from a Belgian informant. One is hiding Jewish children. There was no specific evidence, only vague suspicion. But it was enough to justify an inspection. Barbie was the perfect inspector for this job. The Butcher of Lion, though he had not yet earned that terrible nickname, was meticulous, brutal, and intelligent. He arrived without warning, a standard tactic. If Nevejean was hiding something, catching her off guard might expose it directly. But Nevejean had been preparing for this exact moment since day one. Her office was a carefully constructed theater, every detail planned. The massive filing cabinet held 8,300 children's files, every one legitimate except 153. But those 153 were blended perfectly among the thousands of legitimate records. Finding them would require reviewing each file individually, verifying each name against other sources. Weeks of work. The 37 files in the folder Nevejean showed Barbie were completely real. Legitimate Jewish orphans whose parents truly had died in bombings or circumstances unrelated to deportations. Fully documented. Fully legal. The other 116 Jewish children were not in that specific folder. They were scattered strategically across the system as individual files, disguised as Belgian Catholic orphans. Barbie took the folder. We will verify these against other sources such as population registers and cemetery records. If there are discrepancies, we will return. Of course, Nevejean replied in a perfectly neutral tone. Not overly cooperative, not defensive, just bored bureaucratic efficiency. Barbie finally left. Nevejean waited a full 30 minutes before moving. Then she called Claire Murdoch and André Gulen. Barbie took the files of 37 children, all legitimate, but he will verify them thoroughly. If he finds inconsistencies in cemetery records, they will suspect other files are forged too. What do we do? Gulen asked, worried. We make sure the cemetery records match our files perfectly. Over the next 2 weeks, Murdoch discreetly visited 7 cemeteries in Brussels. She verified that the gravestones of the dead parents physically existed. Where they did not, she paid to have them added immediately. Nothing elaborate, just simple markers with the correct names and dates. It cost 3,500 Belgian francs, money from one's budget, technically embezzlement of government funds. But in practical terms, it saved the entire operation. When the Gestapo checked, everything matched. The parents of the 37 Jewish orphans were truly dead, truly buried, and truly documented. Barbie never returned. The case was officially closed, and one was considered a legitimate operation under Nevejean's competent leadership. But Nevejean knew she had been lucky. Barbie had come only for 37 specific children. What if the Gestapo decided to verify all 8,300 files? She made a hard decision. Slow the operation significantly. Fewer new children, more care with every placement, sacrificing quantity for safety. From March to June 1943, she hid only 29 new children, less than 2 per week, compared to 5 to 7 before Barbie's visit. But each of those 29 was perfectly documented, every backstory triple-checked, every location tested as absolutely safe. The network continued operating effectively, just far more cautiously than before. Part 2 of 2, English translation. Chapter 5, The Dark Years. The year 1944 brought new horrors to Belgium. Deportations from the country intensified dramatically because the Nazis were losing the war, which made them more desperate and more brutal. If they could not win, they would at least complete the genocide. For one, this meant constant increased pressure. More desperate Jewish families, more children needing hiding places, but also more inspections and more Nazi scrutiny. Nevejean expanded the network in new directions. No longer just convents. She began placing children with secular foster families, farmers in Flanders, workers in Wallonia, families willing to take children without asking questions. The risk was greater with these families because they lacked the institutional discipline of convents. They could make mistakes or slip up, and the children could accidentally reveal their real identities. But there was no choice. The convents were completely full, and she urgently needed more locations. Maurice Heiber developed a payment system for foster families. 500 francs per month per child. Money that officially came from one's budget, but in reality came from secret donations by wealthy Belgians sympathetic to the cause. Prince Charles of Belgium, the king's brother, contributed 50,000 francs generously. Belgian businessmen contributed more. The money flowed through complex bank accounts, hiding its origins, eventually appearing in one's budget as charitable donations. By August 1944, Nevejean had hidden 220 children in total, not only Jews, but also Romani children, children of resistance members, and any child in mortal danger. The network included 43 convents, 27 Catholic orphanages, and 68 foster families. More than 150 locations scattered across Belgium. Coordinating it all was an absolute logistical nightmare. Every child needed follow-up visits to ensure they were safe, healthy, and adapting. But visiting too often attracted unwanted attention, while visiting too little put children at risk. André Guerlain became the primary coordinator of visits. She traveled constantly across the country, from Brussels to Antwerp, from Namur to Liège, checking on children. 2 or 3 locations per day, taking coded notes, reporting to Nevejean weekly. The code was simple but effective. The books are in good condition meant the children were safe. The books need repair meant minor issues. The books are damaged meant an absolute crisis. The child had to be moved immediately. In September 1944, an urgent message arrived from a convent in Tournai. The books are damaged. Nevejean sent Guerlain immediately to investigate. The problem was serious. One of the children, Jacob, hidden as Jacques, had revealed his real identity to another orphan. The other child innocently mentioned it to a nun. Jacques says he used to be Jacob. Why did he change his name? The nun handled it brilliantly. Children say strange things when they are traumatized. Jacques is confused. But the danger was obvious. If Jacques kept talking, eventually he would say the wrong thing to the wrong person. Guerlain moved Jacques that same night. New identity, new convent, a fresh beginning. He was 8 years old, and this was his third identity since 1942. Incidents like this were rare but terrifying. Each one reminded Nevejean that a single mistake, a single wrong word, could collapse the entire network. In December 1944, the Nazis established a new command in Brussels under Obersturmbannführer Hoffmann, more aggressive than his predecessors. He ordered surprise inspections of all child welfare institutions. One was inspected 3 times in January 1945, each time by different officers who reviewed files, asked questions, and verified documentation. Nevejean maintained her persona flawlessly. The bored functionary answering mechanically, providing files when requested, with no emotion, no nervousness, only pure bureaucratic boredom. The inspectors found everything in perfect order. Files impeccable. Documentation perfect. No reason to suspect anything. But internally, Nevejean was exhausted. 4 years living a double life. 4 years one mistake away from execution. The stress was unbearable. Albert, her husband, noticed the physical and emotional decline. "You're losing weight, you don't sleep, and this is killing you." "But the children are alive," she replied simply. "That's what matters." Chapter 6. Liberation. On September 2nd, 1944, British troops finally liberated Brussels. The Nazi occupation ended after 4 years of terror, collaboration, and resistance. The streets erupted in celebration. Belgian flags appeared in every window, crowds danced, and British soldiers were welcomed as true heroes. But for Nevejean, liberation created an unexpected new crisis. The 220 children she had hidden were still in false locations, living under false identities. And their parents, if they had survived, did not know where they were. And many parents had not survived the camps. Nevejean began the difficult process of identifying which parents had returned, which were dead, and which were missing. She worked intensively with the Belgian Red Cross, Jewish survivor organizations, and allied military authorities. Of the 220 children she had hidden, 143 had both parents dead, 38 had one surviving parent, 22 had both parents miraculously alive, 17 were in unknown status. The reunions were emotionally charged. Miriam Lichtenstein, the first child Nevejean had hidden, was reunited with her aunt in October 1944. Her mother and father had died in Auschwitz. The girl did not recognize her aunt at all. She had lived 3 years as Marie, and when her aunt called her Miriam, she did not respond because she no longer recognized the name. It took months, sometimes years, for children to reclaim their original identities. Some never fully did, because they had lived crucial formative years as Belgian Catholics, and that became part of who they were. Jacob, the child who almost exposed the operation in Tournai, was reunited with his father in November 1944. His mother had died. His father had survived Buchenwald. The father wept when he saw his son, but Jacob stared at him in confusion. "Who are you?" The trauma of separation, false identities, and years of fear had fragmented childhood memory. Nevejean created a transition program with social workers helping children and surviving parents reconnect, providing therapy, support, and patience. But for the 143 children without parents, the question was complicated. What now? Would they remain in Catholic institutions, be adopted, emigrate to Palestine? The Belgian Jewish community, devastated by the Holocaust, tried to reclaim as many Jewish orphans as possible. But some children actively resisted. They had lived for years as Catholics. They felt Catholic, and the nuns were their families now. Nevejean faced an impossible ethical dilemma. These were Jewish children, but did she have the right to leave them in Catholic environments? Or was her duty to return them to the Jewish community? She consulted rabbis, Yvonne Nevejean of the CDJ, and the children themselves when they were old enough. The decision was to treat each case individually. Some children returned to extended Jewish families. Others remained with Catholic foster families who had protected them. Some were adopted. There was no universal solution. In January 1945, the restored Belgian government officially recognized Nevejean's work with the Resistance Medal and public honors. But Nevejean rejected publicity. "I did nothing extraordinary. I did my job, protecting children." Her humility was genuine. For her, this had never been heroism. It was professional duty. The children under her care needed protection, and she provided it. Chapter 7. The Hidden Legacy. For decades after the war, Yvonne Nevejean's work remained relatively unknown. She did not write memoirs, she did not give extensive interviews, and she continued working in child welfare until her retirement in 1965, living quietly with Albert. The children she saved scattered across the world. Some stayed in Belgium, others emigrated to Israel, the United States, and Canada. They rebuilt lives and raised families, but they never forgot the woman who had saved them. In 1965, Yad Vashem began investigating Nevejean's work using survivor testimonies, documents, and convent records. The full scope of the operation emerged gradually. The final numbers were staggering. 4,600 children saved directly or indirectly through Nevejean's network. Not only Jews, but also Romani children, children of resistance members, and children from communist families. Of those 4,600, 2,200 had been placed directly by Nevejean with forged documentation, while the other 2,400 were helped through her network with legitimate paperwork or without requiring forgery. In 1965, Yvonne Nevejean was recognized as righteous among the nations. The ceremony took place in Jerusalem, and 42 of the children she had saved attended, now adults with families of their own. Miriam Lichtenstein, now Miriam Cohen, living in Tel Aviv, spoke emotionally. I was 6 years old when Madame Nevejean turned me into Marie. I didn't understand why. I only knew I had to obey. She visited me once at the convent and asked if I was all right. I told her yes, and she smiled. It was the only time I ever saw her smile. I am here today with 3 children and 7 grandchildren because that woman decided to risk everything for a little girl she didn't know. Nevejean accepted the honor with her characteristic humility. In her brief speech, she said, "Many people helped actively. The nuns who took children in knowing the risks, the families who hid them, Andre Gulen, Claire Murdoch, Maurice Heiber, my team at One, Father Bruno, and Cardinal Van Roey. All deserve recognition. I only coordinated." But the survivors knew the truth. Without Nevejean's system, without her perfect paperwork and her quiet courage, they would have died. Yvonne Nevejean died on May 15, 1987, at the age of 87. Her funeral in Brussels was attended by more than 200 people, many of them children she had saved, now elderly themselves. Her obituary in Le Soir described her as the librarian who kept children among files. A perfect description. She had used bureaucracy as a weapon, files as hiding places, and boredom as camouflage. In 1993, Andre Gulen, who had worked with Nevejean during the war, was also recognized as righteous among the nations. At her ceremony, now 73, she recalled, "Yvonne taught us something crucial, that extraordinary work can be disguised as ordinary, and that heroism can look boring. She never raised her voice or carried a weapon. She only moved papers from one file to another, but those papers saved thousands of lives." The One building in Brussels now bears a commemorative plaque. In this building, 1940 to 1944, Yvonne Nevejean led a network that saved 4,600 children from Nazi genocide. Visitors can see the reconstructed office with the desk, the massive filing cabinet, and the forms from that era. It is a discreet museum, just as Nevejean would have wanted. Modern estimates of descendants are conservative, because many children never fully revealed their wartime stories. But researchers in 2015 identified at least 12,000 living descendants of the children Nevejean saved. Among them are 3 members of the Israeli Knesset, 2 university rectors, a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, 37 doctors, 51 professors, 200 business owners, and thousands of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. All because a librarian decided files could hide more than documents. The Nazis laughed at a librarian until they discovered, too late, that she was hiding 200 children among books. But by the time they understood, the war was over. The children had survived, and Yvonne Nevejean had won her silent war. As she wrote in a private letter to André Goelin in 1970, "Sometimes I think of Klaus Barbie reviewing those 37 files in my office in 1943. So sure he would expose the fraud, so confident in Nazi superiority. It never occurred to him that the bored woman behind the desk was smarter than he was, that her perfectly organized files were a weapon. That was our advantage. They could not imagine bureaucracy could be resistance, that files could be hiding places, and that a librarian could be a warrior." The Nazis laughed at a librarian, but Yvonne Nevejean had the last laugh. And 4,600 children lived to prove it.